Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly study session where we are in season 2 doing things, but also we've decided to just start going over various little bits of literature together since it's quite hard to find time to read them, do our homework. We do our homework with you listening. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
And this week we're going to read, which I feel like I should have already read. I know about it, but we're going to read that UN poverty report on Britain entitled Statement on Visit to the United Kingdom by Professor Philip Alston, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, from the 16th of November 2018.
Can you send me a link, please?
Oh, sorry.
Can you Slack me the link, please?
All right, and listeners can find the link in the description, along with all our other links. I always put them all in. Everything we talk about that can have a link to it gets a link. What do you know about this report?
I know that it was incredibly damning. Is the headline that something like 1 in 5 kids living in extreme poverty or something. It might even be worst? Might even be worse than that. But I know that it was very damning. And I personally, when it came out, it made me think back to a conversation that I had with somebody at work where I was struggling to believe that people were living in such extreme poverty in this country, or such high numbers of people. And I was like, in fact, I made a note to myself to email that person and say, sorry. But I think it's like climate change. You know, we don't want to believe that things are this bad for this many people. Yeah,
we insulate ourselves from it. And I certainly, poverty, like in the UK and anywhere else, has really sort of came to the forefront of my consciousness after I did the Think Nation thing late last year. But we've covered it when we talked about money. Like, we're all 99% of us are much closer to poverty than we will ever be to kind of comfort, to kind of permanent feeling of safety. And that's a real problem because it kind of puts you into a panic mode. It's like Rutger Bregman says, poverty isn't a lack of character, it's a lack of cash. And but anyway, we're going to read through this, see what comes out of it. I expect we won't get very far through it, but just if the silver gun hypothesis was anything to go by. But I guess we'll just go back and forth through it, see what it sparks, see if we have any ideas as well.
Yes.
How have you been, Ivanka? How's it going?
How's it going? This week has been a good week. The trains have been working, which always improves the efficiency of my life. I have delivered the final presentation on my big project that I've been working on, which went very well. And I felt very satisfied that I had done my homework, and that was good. And then, what else has happened this week? There was something I noted mentally, but then forgot to write down. We had the child's birthday party. That was fun. Oh, but I told you about that, didn't I? Because we recorded. I don't know. Anyway, the child's birthday party was fun, but we recorded on Monday night, so you already know about that. I've been having some interesting join-ins with people on the internet. I think at something like 30 days from Brexit.
Oh, God.
It's less than that, is that? Where things are looking quite...
February for us today.
So we're a month from Brexit, and things are looking as stable as ever.
Like, I'm seeing the threat of, like, I feel like postponement is in some ways a worst case scenario. Like, can we not postpone it? Can we just do something? Because we can't be living in like, if they just keep postponing it now, it's going to be like, that's worse than just kind of, okay, smash everything and then at least we can start dealing with it, knowing what's going on. Like we've said, like uncertainty is the worst.
Yeah, part of me agrees that postponing it would be just like a slow death. But I think that in some ways, though, I mean, it would allow time. It does seem like there's more support for a second referendum, but I am afraid of a second referendum. I am. There's no doubt about it that I am. You know, while it might summon more Remainers to actually get up and vote, it will also summon Leavers. This is the week.
Here's an experiment. If Brexit is objectively a bad idea, the Remainers, that the Leavers that will vote will be the ones that don't want to admit that they were wrong the first time round. Yeah. But hopefully there won't be more Leavers. Whereas we know for a fact that at least 2 years worth of young people are now able to vote.
Yeah.
And just
2
even
years worth of old people have died. This is true. There was a day quite recently when it turned to the country would have statistically turned Remain just based on deaths and
and
aging.
that's not hyperbole, is it? There's stats for that show that younger people wanted to Remain. Yeah. But yeah, like so if I mean, I guess like a bit of postponement, if we are actually going to change it, it's going to have to happen. But yeah, this just don't turn this into we're going to keep moving the goalpost indefinitely, because that no one wins from that.
No, and it will, and it should, and I think this is it's good that we're discussing poverty today, because I think poverty is absolutely, I mean, it's not even a think. I think objectively you can conclude that people who are disproportionately suffering the ill effects of living in Britain are the people who voted Leave. Yeah. You know, the people who are fucked off. And so, you know, we know that we need to improve. We need to have more people living a good life, a stable life, a comfortable life, in order for them to be a bit more open-hearted. Yeah. I mean, this is the same week that we've had wildfires in Sussex. God. So with our sort of record-breaking high temperatures, 20 degrees it was in England day before yesterday, in Wales, I think. And so Ashdown Forest, which is Pooh Bear's stomping ground, has, I think, the actual sort of part of the forest that inspired the story has had 65 firemen fighting a fire. Something that's classified as a wildfire in Sussex, I think, is quite historically remarkable, or climatologically remarkable. Yeah. And also, we've also had a gun club somewhere in the country, I don't know exactly where, was using a picture of Shamima Begum for target practice. Oh, lovely. So, you know, whatever you know, there's just so many degrees of wrong in that it's almost not worth. It's almost, you know, you could have a whole episode about how wrong that is. So yes, it's an interesting time. So good week to talk about poverty, I think. How about you, Michael? How was your week?
I'm quite excited about a flash of inspiration I had this morning, which was around, like, so I read this. I saw Otto had linked to something. Like there's this book. Have you seen that book? Show Your Work, Share Your Work, or whatever it is. And there's another one called Steal Like an Artist. No. And so I was just having a look through. I thought I'll have a look through that because the other one was quite good. And one of the, I mean, let's face it, pretty obvious points that I'm not even convinced I'd internalised was that you should make things that you want to hear or see. As a musician, make music that you would like to hear. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that seems obvious. But I don't know if I'm in the habit of thinking like that. It's either been like a technical, like where are the gaps in my technical ability, or what do I think might work today, or, you know, there's been a bit too much of that and not enough. Okay, what would I quite like to hear? What would I want to listen to? And I got a bit stumped by that question, and then I kind of came back to, I enjoyed my Infinite Music Machine. So I like 2014, I released an app as an album, which was basically 1,000 loops that I'd recorded, and then an algorithm.
I remember playing with that.
And so there was an algorithm. So I just wrote the algorithm that then sort of like played through these different loops and sort of layered them up in different ways. And, it's a certain style, but I was sort of like, I kind of like to do some more like that, where the music isn't just sort of set in concrete. It's sort of, it keeps surprising you, but sort of whilst bringing back elements that are recognisable, but sort of like composed in different ways. I think that's what I'd quite like to listen to. And then I kind of got into this, okay, but I need to figure out Android support. So if you don't know, to make apps, you have to write code for either iPhones, like iOS devices, or Android devices. Generally, that's the case. Particularly if you want to do like audio stuff, which is some of the more difficult. Like it's more difficult for phones to do because they're not that powerful. So audio stuff tends to be a bit. It's never been good on Android. Like they've never had a great ecosystem of music apps, for example. So my Infinite Music Machine I built using a good framework that is available on iOS, but there's nothing really like that, or like I'd have to learn a separate one to support Android. But there are also better ways now of making things that work on different platforms. When I wanted to explain this idea, I forgot that I would probably have to also explain about app development. But I know the listener. But I was thinking about that and trying to think. Well, maybe there's this API. Doing a bit of googling, and then I thought, no, what I should do instead of making it on the phone, just do like a live stream. So I just put it in I have some box in my house or somewhere that is just constantly broadcasting the Infinite Music Machine, and people can just tune in using like a radio app or just on Facebook or in different places as a live stream, and then everyone hears the same thing, which is kind of cool, but it's also evolving all the time. So it sort of ticks that like music should be a shared experience box that I really love. But also then like takes away all those technical questions of how do I do support across devices, and I was like, yes, that's it. And then with that I can also kind of add a visual aspect to it as well if I want. I can do like visuals, and there's another guy in the room with me that does that all day, so I thought we can sort of set up the stream like that. And so that's my next music project, I think, like the infinite radio station kind of thing. And then I can even connect it into chat so people could, affect it. Yeah. Could sort of go, I want more of that sound, or even like put their own things in. And I've been talking to Tim Exile, who's got this project that he's just launched. He's sort of doing a soft launch of at the moment. I think it's okay to talk about it, called Endless with 3 S's, which is all about kind of jamming together, like making loops, and then you can be in different places and you can all be building up these loops together and doing that kind of thing. And I think like it would hook into that really well as well. Like so you could have like a radio station, which is sometimes the sort of, and I could do some different recordings, record loads more loops at different speeds, different things, hone the algorithm knowing that it only has to run on one machine. It doesn't have to run on like everyone's phone in every situation. And I think that'd be kind of awesome.
If the success of a project could be judged by the enthusiasm of the person who had the idea, I think you've got a winner.
So I'm excited about that idea.
If I was a venture capitalist now, I would give you some money.
Ooh.
I told you the other week about, or last week or whatever it was, about the buy less badge.
Yeah.
Buy less stuff.
Yeah.
I was sort of sitting on the train, sort of trying to map it out. Like, is there a way you could, like magic 8-ball type thing? You're in a shop or you're thinking about buying something, you shake your phone, do I need this? No.
Always says no.
It always says no. But I was thinking, like, what do you actually need to buy? Anyway, the idea that way, I was just fiddling on a train. I wasn't really getting anywhere, but I was trying to think about, without making it too preachy. So, how do you kind of encourage people to, how do you use, and somebody I shared a tweet last night about this, which was somebody saying like, if all of us, the marketing people, the advertising people, the user researchers, the programmers, if all of us club together to change people's behavior, we can change people's behavior. We do it all the time. We get people to buy shit. Yeah. So we need to do the same thing in reverse.
I should hook you up with that guy that was bullying people outside Selfridges. What have you bought there? Like I've got his YouTube channel written down somewhere.
Literally, is that what he was doing?
Selfridges guy is called Social Experimentalist on YouTube. I still haven't looked at it, but he was quite good. He was quite funny. He didn't seem like a total nutcase, but he was just shaming people in front of. He goes, the state of people coming out of Selfridges look confused, not well, poorer.
Well, yeah.
Went above my Selfridges guy thing that I found in my notes, I'd made this other note about when someone's ideas are challenged, and the Leave voter, on James O'Brien, kind of like just defending the thing, and it's like. And then also seeing the people reacting to this guy yelling, telling them off for shopping in Selfridges. And I had this thought, which is we don't adjust in the moment. We go away and reconfigure our suit of armour.
Yes.
Right, we get all this stuff, but we don't change the armour in the moment, because because I guess to change it, you got to take it off and then you're completely vulnerable. We have the suit, and then we go away, and then we kind of do a bit of tailoring on it and think about it and maybe take it off, try another one. But we don't do it at the moment that we're in the conflict. So, yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, this Saturday there was a vegan fair near where I live, and as I walked in, I thought I was sort of contributing to some running fee or ticket or whatever, but it wasn't. It was I was greeted by a vegan campaigner, activist person, whose starting point for conversation, or the organisation that he's part of, do what they call witnessing animals. So they will go and stop a lorry on the way into an abattoir and essentially look at the animals and say, we see you, you have existed, you have. They acknowledge their presence. And the way he described it, I found it very moving. I mean, as anybody, it's widely known that I care about the environment, and therefore I've always been conscious of eating meat, but I do still eat meat. And I've had this, and I said to him, he was talking to me, I said, look, I'm not where you are yet. I'm on a journey. One day I'll, might end up where you are, but at the moment I'm still on my journey. And so we ended up having this conversation, and he complimented me on my humility, which was an interesting choice of words, and he was very nice, but he also judged me. He used words like, when you have been doing something that is wrong for your entire life. And and luckily, I think one thing this podcast has taught both of us, or helped us both learn, is this ability to pause, take a deep breath, and try and embrace listening and talking about things that hurt, that stick you. Though Michael you and I have not had a successful conversation about food ever.
Well, that's because you've been doing it wrong your whole life.
It's true, because I'm a wrong
because you're not vegan. I'm not vegan.
It's true. So anyway, we've been
talking. Ivanka, I will let you continue. The fake meat science has come a long way, even in the last 2 years. You should try it. Try some of those little chipolatas. Sorry, go on. It's good. Corn sausages are actually really nice. The corn chipolatas, I mean. It's really good.
Anyway.
And no gristly bullshit.
I'm vegan. Listen, I'm vegan most days.
All right.
But I'm the shittest vegan. I'm not a vegan, but I'm not a vegan food. Anyway, so me and this guy are having a conversation about it. But what reminded me about it was what you just said. There was no way I was going to walk away from that conversation, not because I wasn't willing to, but I was having an open conversation. I was like, yeah, I understand your point of view, and what you've just said about witnessing the animals is very moving. But I also, if I get invited to someone's house for dinner, I'm not going to waste food. There's other issues. And I was talking to him about how emotional food is. It's so complex, the psychology behind it. I was a teenage girl who didn't eat a lot for sometime. Yeah, I managed to get down to 1 tomato and a slice of bread as my daily food for some time. So not eating and making choices about food, to me, is very complex. Being now a parent, there is nothing more pleasurable than watching your child eat something that's going to be really good for them. And again, but you can't make them. You can't force them to eat healthy food. This is the kind of way I was talking to him. But again, even as somebody who was open to what he was preaching, there was no way I was going to stand in front of him like, do you know what, mate, you're right.
I am now a vegan.
From this moment forth, I am a vegan. It's like, at best, all he can hope for is that he's planted more seeds in my head that then will make my journey towards and I even said to him, I said, I believe that in the next few years, sub 10, that eating meat, certainly in sort of quote unquote developed countries, will become as shameful as smoking, or it will be done because we're going to have to adapt. And so I was like, I think that's a potential outcome. So given even that I know all of those things, or like I think all of those things, I'm not walking away from this chat going, yeah, right, mate, you're right. When are you next going to be protesting in front of an abattoir so I can join you? So yes, that was a very long answer to your standing outside of Selfridges shaming people. It's not gonna create an immediate reaction, but hopefully, I mean, even if he'd persuaded 2 of them in a day, or one of them that go home and go, do you know what? Do I really need to go? Is shopping in Selfridges actually a day out, or is it a chore?
Let's read the statement on visit to the United Kingdom by Professor Philip Alston, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, London, 16 November 2018. Shall we?
Let's.
Do you want to take the intro? First paragraph?
Wow, it's a long first paragraph. Okay, here we go. Introduction. The UK is the world's 5th largest economy. It contains many areas of immense wealth. Its capital is a leading centre of global finance. Its entrepreneurs are innovative and agile. And despite the current political turmoil, it has a system of government that rightly remains the envy of much of the world.
Says more about the world than us.
Sentence. I think it does. Well, this is what I had this conversation at work yesterday. Somebody was like, have you heard this? The logic... Sorry, I'm digressing straight away. Well, the logic of the fact that the referendum can't be declared null and void. So there were illegal activities that led to the result. The result cannot be declared null and void because the actual referendum was only ever, in legal terms, advisory.
Right.
So an advisory thing cannot be declared null and void because no decision should have come of it. So therefore, the fact that it was illegal, and then so we have no legislation for declaring an advisory referendum null and void. So we were talking about this at work, and I was like, that's because this is the United Kingdom. We're not supposed to have illegal referendums. Fuck's sake, this isn't the Balkans. Anyway. So we're still the envy of the world, lucky us. It thus seems patently unjust and contrary to British values that so many people are living in poverty. This is obvious to anyone who opens their eyes to see the immense growth in food banks and the queues waiting outside them. The people sleeping rough in the street, the growth of homelessness, the sense of deep despair that leads even the government to appoint a minister for suicide prevention and civil society to report in depth on unheard of levels of loneliness and isolation.
Whoa. I didn't know about that suicide prevention
Me
minister.
Neither.
And also, it's interesting that it goes straight to loneliness and isolation as well. But is that connected to poverty? I guess we'll find out. But I've got this theory around pubs and alcohol, which is on the one hand, yeah, alcohol's bad, so let's tax the hell out of it so that people think twice before, drinking to excess. But now our public places have become too expensive to hang out. Like pubs were always like a centre of a community, and now they're sort of closing down because it's so much more expensive to drink in the pub than it is at home. So it's sort of almost by trying to look after people's health, we've ended up isolating them. Because that's something I have learnt from quitting drinking as well, is like without that sort of addiction pull, without that sort of thing, I fancy a pint, it's just, who can be bothered to go to the pub? Like I've sort of lost interest. And I think that's, it's not directly related to this, but that's one of my theories. Michael's theories.
I mean, there's that community pub in Bevendine in Brighton that is, it's owned by and run by the community, and these community spaces, like this is his next sentence, he says, and local authorities, especially in England, which perform vital roles in providing a real social safety net, have been gutted by a series of government policies. Libraries have closed in record numbers. Community and youth centres have been shrunk and underfunded. Public spaces and buildings, including parks and recreation centres, have been sold off. While the labour and housing markets provide the crucial backdrop, the focus of this report is on the contribution made by social security and related policies. I mean, if you're closing the library next to my mother's house, so Brighton, we are blessed with a fantastic central library. Really, it has apparently the children's centre, the children's part has one of the highest footfalls in the country. Blah blah blah. It's brilliant. The library by my mum's house is barely, like, my mum was going with my daughter, and you need some special card to access it, and you can't, it's barely manned.
Right.
Or womaned, but it's locked most of the time. Its opening hours have been seriously restricted. And my mum lives in a very different part of town that has a mix, but it's much more it's out of the centre. So for her, she lives 3 miles, more or less, 2.5 miles from the library. So it's a bus trip or a long walk, but if you've not got things in your actual community where you're living, you're not going to bump into people, you're not going to have casual chats. There's nowhere safe to go and sit. The Brighton Library, people just go and sit there. The downstairs is all noisy and vibrant, and it's got a cafe, and it's a great space to go and meet people.
There's and speaking of youth centres, I'm actually, I'm in a room above a youth centre now, and this is the studio that I'm in. So this is for the first time in podcast history. Other Michael has just come into the room, and I'm having to podcast whilst aware that someone can hear me. And the first thing I want to do is talk about something that he knows way more than me about. So this is going to go well. Hasn't reacted to that, so maybe he's not listening. We're in we're in an area in Queen's Park, and all around it is being regenerated. But I think it's all kind of like private investment. All the council houses are being pulled down, and I think it's going to be a lot of kind of I don't know the details.
Luxury
of it,
housing.
Kind of, that seems to be the wave coming through this area, and the building I'm in, like one of the things we want to do is like kind of protect it by kind of bringing in some money and kind of making sure that it doesn't just get knocked down, I think there's a risk of that. And then like it's just another youth centre just lost to kind of privatisation and whatever this kind of wave of badness is. So all I'm trying to say is I'm just trying to virtue signal that I'm actually trying to do something. Contributing. To my local community. I've been living very local recently. It's good.
I contribute to my local pub by going there once a week. What you say about the price of drinks is totally like, we've got Brighton again. It is Brighton, so we've got all these craft beers and microbreweries and all this stuff. But that means then that a pint can be like upwards of £6.
I can't even understand it when I go to a bar now. I'm like, what is going on? How can you people like this is, and it's so much money, this alcohol.
But yeah, it is. But equally, like there is also a rise in non-alcoholic spirits type things.
Oh yeah,
because
they still cost the same though.
Well, yeah, but on the social aspect, really, if you're not drinking. there are some very good non-alcoholic beers.
Yeah.
And there are some very good spirits now they're starting to make. So there's this quite nice cocktail bar in Brighton that we went to. We went out on a date last Friday and went for a. We had a glass of Prosecco though, not a. But I was looking behind the bar and they had 4 or 5 quite fancy and probably enormously expensive, but non-alcoholic spirits that you could have a cocktail made out
I think
of.
there's definitely a trend going in that direction, but which I definitely appreciate when I am out, because it used to just be much more of a nightmare to get anything that I wanted to drink in a pub. However, that financial thing is still, it's like, I just don't really want to spend 20 quid for 2 hours.
But then the irony of us reading a poverty report talking about cocktail bar.
Well, I
started
you
it.
said it, not me.
But I also think that you can't solve. It's like on the loneliness thing. So again, I do live in a part of town that is quite community focused, or at least likes to try it, pretend that it is. And I'm part of a network of mums, and we do hand out bags of clothes to each other and hand them. Like my daughter's very particular about the clothes that she won't wear. Like she won't wear anything. It has to be tights or leggings. Anything that has a belt or button, she's like, get it off. She obviously, I don't think she likes the feeling restricted. But anyway, so I get handed a big bag of clothes. We go through the bits that she likes, and then it goes on to the neighbour 4 doors down. I mean, these are other ways of sharing wealth.
Well, Brighton is very much like it's the place where this sort of thing is going to be happening. How are you aware of many other places like Brighton? Like even I guess Brixton Pound. Like there's
you say this, but this Brighton that I live in. So my sister lives in much more the centre. So I referred to a conversation earlier where I discussed poverty, and I was like, no, it's not that bad, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I mean, my own sister spent a year volunteering in a food bank, so it's not like I'm not aware.
I've generalised Brighton, have I?
Yeah, but Brighton really has 2 layers. Yeah. It has a very, very impoverished layer, and then it has this like middle class wankers layer, down from London types. Yeah. Me, I fall in that category. Of people that can sit here talking about poverty and then talk about the glass of Prosecco I had in a fancy cocktail bar. I am not impoverished in any way. I may be trying to walk around with my eyes open, but it doesn't mean that I see everything or that I'm fully aware. But if the things like there's all sorts of effects on society of the rising house prices in central London has had this weird impact on adult social care, because the parents may be still living in a house they bought 40, 50 years ago in central London, but the children can't afford to live in central London, so they've had to move out. Yeah. So then instead of having your local network, and this speaks to the loneliness a bit, I think, is that we're not around for each other. And maybe the pub is a frivolous example of a centre of a community, but having these spaces where you bump into each other in the park, or just being able to live near
each other is just such a big thing. Like this, I loved East London when I was living out there, because I would just have those chance encounters that I've not had anywhere else in London, and now it's not really like that. It probably unless you move to somewhere else, and that's all become really expensive.
I've just read the beginning of so the results. 14 million people, a fifth of the population, live in poverty. 4 million of these are more than 50% below the poverty line, and 1.5 million are destitute, unable to afford basic essentials. Fucking hell. So 1.5 million people are unable to afford basic essentials. I presume that means food, hygiene materials, things like that. Is that the basic essentials?
Okay.
Fuck.
Well, let's find out. Let's define the poverty line.
Okay.
So the poverty line sets the poverty. Okay. This survey set the poverty line at 60% of the median UK household income.
The widely respected Institute for Fiscal Studies predicts a 7% rise in child poverty between 2015 and 2022, and various sources predict child poverty rates of as high as 40%. Now, I know from that research that I did at Wellcome Trust, because one of my participants was somebody who researches homelessness, child poverty is the biggest indicator for homelessness and rough sleeping later in life. So if we're going to have a 40% increase, up to 40% increase of child poverty, then we're looking like this is going to take. You can't just fix this in a year. These kids are already living in poverty, so we're creating a problem for in 18, 15, 20 years time. My calculations, which are probably high because I looked for median salary, but I guess that implies employed people, but that came out like £17,000 a year income. Wow,
which
it's just not a lot.
But I suspect that if the median line actually, I presume it covers all the unemployed people, so then I presume that would kind of be significantly lower than that. So I can, just trying to live on. But even trying to live on £16,000 a year, with a family as well, I just don't even know.
So then, this is really
last
shocking.
sentence
Listed for almost 1 in every 2 children to be poor in 21st century Britain is not just a disgrace, but a social calamity and an economic disaster, all rolled into one. There you go, Britain.
How did we not, and we're not, how can we be so oblivious to it? We segregate ourselves off. It's not South Africa. It's not like we're living in gated communities with armed guards, but we don't like to, I now kind of on a daily basis do have to sort of walk through a council estate. And it's just, that's kind of an unusual experience for me. You tend to avoid you sort of feel a bit like, oh no, I'm in a dangerous area now. There's poor people. It's just, it's not on, right? It's terrible.
Yeah, it's
but
terrible.
We're able to just kind of not look away the whole time. And then next thing you know, you got a Brexit on your hands because it's so easy to kind of, it's not just the Facebook bubble. It's just,
I think this is where I struggle a bit with my vegan activist friend. In a way, I was like, when I was talking to him, I was like, I get that you're witnessing animals. Who's witness? For me, I think I still do put the need to witness humans above, and I don't do enough of that. I don't think we need to beat ourselves up too severely.
No,
I've never voted for anything that would inflict this kind of life on people. I pay my taxes, all that business. I'm not offshoring myself.
Yeah, I think there's the fact that we have to have this pointed out to us is sort of a bit of a problem, right?
It is a problem, yeah. It's just the choice of words. This is hard hitting. This is a smack in the face.
Almost 1 in every 2 children will be poor in 21st century Britain. 1 in every 2. Half of the children, nearly,
will be
in
poor.
poverty.
And this has been a slow, but this has not happened overnight. We have gone down. I remember being told by a friend of mine who was teacher training and she was in a primary school in Brighton, a not central one, and she said they had to have a breakfast club where they fed children because so many of the children were coming to school having not been fed. And you're going to have behaviour problems. Like a child who's not eaten breakfast is not going to be able to concentrate. A child who is paranoid that they smell because their clothes haven't been able to be washed because, their mother's making a choice between heating up their dinner or putting the washing machine on. Being poor is so multi-level bad that
it's
just like
it amplifies itself. It's a positive. It reinforces itself. It amplifies. The effects are just amplified the more we know.
Yeah, this. Totally. And I'm going back to my I think I mean, both you and I have had this as part of our childhood. There has been big moments of not having, and not being the kid in school. I distinctly remember having one pair of jeans for the week and 2 shirts and one, and that was because weirdly Yugoslavia didn't have a uniform. And one thing that school uniforms protect you from is competition over clothes. Because everyone's got to wear grey trousers and a white shirt and the end of. And then, and I think, but so it's like I was very conscious as a 13, 14-year-old girl of the fact that we did not have money to buy me lots of clothes. But I've talked about that when I've talked about over shopping in my 20s. But it's that kind of like I guess I feel very bad reading this, so I want to go. It's not like I'm Ivanka Trump.
It's my turn to do a paragraph.
Okay, go.
But the full picture of low-income well-being in the UK cannot be captured by statistics alone. Its manifestations are clear for all to see. The country's most respected charitable groups, its leading think tanks, its parliamentary committees, independent authorities like the National Audit Office, and many others have all drawn attention to the dramatic decline in the fortunes of the least well-off in this country. But through it all, one actor has stubbornly resisted seeing the situation for what it is. The government has remained determinedly in a state of denial. Even while devolved authorities in Scotland and Northern Ireland are frantically trying to devise ways to mitigate, or in other words, counteract, at least the worst features of the government's benefits policy, ministers insisted that all is well and running according to plan. Some tweaks to basic policy have reluctantly been made, but there has been a determined resistance to change in response to the many problems which so many people at all levels have brought to my attention. So is it, head in the sand?
I don't think it's head in the sand.
Or
I
just
think
contempt.
It's a willful contempt and a lack of understanding. I mean, I did user research on universal credit in 2013, and the minister that I was presenting results to at the time was nodding off, and I distinctly remember I was telling him about, we were doing a presentation, I was talking to him about an example in one of my user research interviews where a woman, and she was underemployed, not on it, because when the universal credit has got 2 or 3 aspects to it that are very good. Don't get me wrong here. Like, they do something about, by putting all the benefits into one benefit, that may or may not be, or the best thing about it is that it's meant to adapt to your income dynamically. Right. So therefore, if you've managed to get a week or two's work in the old system, coming on and off benefits was so arduous that it wasn't worth saying yes to a week's paid work, because you might not then earn any money for a month while everyone fucked about working out that you were back on benefits. So the cleverest thing about it, in my opinion, and having done, is the fact that it's supposed to adapt. So for people who are underemployed, maybe a supply teacher, a hairdresser, or somebody who there's a kind of self-employment aspects of it where this month I've done really well, I don't need any benefits, thank you, but next month I need you to top me up. Great. Clever idea. Some of it is good. There are some aspects of it that are not good, but my involvement in the project is old now, so I don't know how much of those things have been adjusted. What I did learn from doing my user research with my participants is that for people who have been, and use the word quite advisedly, burnt by the welfare system. So, for example, let's say there's been a cock up with your housing benefit, and suddenly your rent doesn't get paid for 8 months, and these are kind of cock ups happen, and so then you've borrowed, you've got into debt, it finally gets sorted out, your landlord evicted you, you've lost your credit rating, you've lost your credibility with your family. You are not going to want to change anything. Once you've got it back on the straight and narrow, you are frozen. You're like, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust the system to rescue me. I don't trust anything. And then you've got this. So I understand that. And I there's a long way to go to make those people feel that they are safe. So going back to your American guy saying, I want the freedom to make money. I think, my interpretation of that is I want to be safe. I want to feel safe. I want to feel like I can tell my boss that, no, I can't do that overtime. Fuck you, I'm going home. I'm going to go and read a book. Or
actually, just in terms of what you're saying, the way we grew up, my dad, couldn't afford to work a little bit. Because the benefits would just be stopped. So, when you've got 7 kids relying on you, you're not going to take the risk. And then you end up with all the knock-on effects of unemployment, which is just awful. And all those
kind of 0-hour contracts where I've got a risk coming off my benefits because you may or may not give me some hours next week. That's ridiculous. So, but there was one of the women I interviewed, and she fell in this category of what the working tax credits category, which is that I work, but I don't get paid enough, so the government has to top me up, and which is a Labour policy that has been eroded. Destroyed, I think they've been completely abolished now. But anyway, but the way her budgeting in her house worked was that she would do things like, they had Wi-Fi at home, but it was on a 3G dongle that she would plug into her laptop because, but she only had texts on her phone, not calls on her mobile, because if she paid to top up her 3G dongle, then she would get free text messages on her phone plus the data, and then that saved her the £3 a week she needed to pay for her son to go to football club.
Right.
So we're talking, and all this thing about, poor people just need to learn how to budget. These people can budget. These people know, or, I didn't encounter anybody who wasn't doing this kind of maths on a daily basis. Like, right, okay, if I buy that and that's my little, and I was talking to ministers who live off £1 million a year trust funds.
Right.
Even if your salary is 20,000, 50.
I want £1 million a year trust fund.
Me too. But anyway, even whatever your salary is monthly, whether it's £100, well, okay, there is a difference, but at some point, you know that if you don't get paid, there's going to be no more money. Whereas if you're living off a infinite pot of money that gets paid to you, and it just keeps coming, you've got no concept of. What £3 to you? What's £3 to them? Nothing.
I know.
And so I don't think that this is a ignoring or this is a willful attack.
Yeah, but it's an attack
on the proletariat. Long live the revolution.
So strange because it's. What I took from that was just like, if they just literally have no way of understanding it, that's a problem too. There's contempt.
That is a problem, yeah.
But there's just like complete, like we're, ruled by this kind of elite class of people that don't need to work. They're not going to understand our problems, and that's terrible.
And it's that leads to things like what Rutger Bregman said, the Margaret Thatcher quote of, that poverty is what was her
personality
quote?
defect, she said.
Personality defect.
Poverty is a personality defect.
But what it is, and I actually was talking about something similar with a friend on the train last night, and I was like, I hate to sound like my father sometimes, but it's like, if we weren't oppressed, I do say we, because if we weren't oppressed in this way, then we would have the time to be more powerful. We would be able to club together and go, no,
take the risk,
not okay.
Roll the dice, know that if this one doesn't work out, we can try again. Like, this is just not a luxury the 99% of us will ever have.
No. And so it's that thing of like, even, you know, any form of activism, anything, you have, you know, like, you either have to make a choice to say, I'm going to live in extreme poverty in order to follow my beliefs, or you have to have the luxury of not needing to live in it. You know, like, it's, anyway, there's my preachy bit.
All right, let's continue.
Let's continue.
The good news is that many of the problems could readily be solved if the government were to acknowledge the problems and consider some of the recommendations below. In my travels across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, I met with people living in poverty, whether old, young, disabled, in work or not. I talked with civil society, frontline workers, work coaches and officials from local, devolved and UK governments, and visited community organisations, social housing, a job centre, a food bank, an advice centre, a library and a primary school. I also met a range of ministers in the central government and in Wales, as well as with the First Minister in Scotland. I spoke at length with politicians from all the major political parties. In the past 2 weeks, I've talked with people who depend on food banks and charities for their next meal, who are sleeping on friends' couches because they're homeless and don't have a safe space for their children to sleep, who have sold sex for money or shelter, children who are growing up in poverty, unsure of their future, young people who feel gangs are their only way out of destitution, and people with disabilities who are told they need to go back to work or lose support against their doctor's orders. I've also seen tremendous resilience, strength and generosity, with neighbours supporting one another, councils seeking creative solutions and charities stepping in to fill holes in government services. I also heard stories of deeply compassionate work coaches and a regional job centre director who transformed the ethos in the relevant offices.
Well, I think on the job centre front as well, you know, a lot of people... One of the things that I've learned from doing projects for central government is that, and that's one of the reasons that we should have some faith that whatever happens with Brexit will be reasonably okay, is because we do have a civil service, the majority of which is staffed by people who take their job seriously, you know, understand that it's their job to keep the lights on as ministerial, you know, as government policy waves above their heads and goes up and down and left and right and they're like keeping, and I've met some job centre staff, because I also interviewed job centre staff, and you meet people who are like, there's some of the people that I interviewed, I was like, if I ever had a problem, I would come to you, because you are just so wise and warm and just, you know what you're doing. There's some amazing people that work in,
presumably
and
terribly underpaid
and suffering IT, you know, usually my involvement is something to do with IT. It's like, and suffering IT systems that should be, you know, burnt to the ground. And it is suffering, but they, you know, like, you've got people who have to wait 20 minutes for their computers to start up in the morning.
Oh my God.
Do you know, when they're given like 10 minutes a session to talk to somebody who's suffering major life trauma because they haven't got, you know, So yes, I'm sure there are some amazing people out there, but all of these things rely on people going out of their way and putting in more than their life's force. You know, it's still a job, and it's not cool.
No, and I'd add to that, like, my experience of working in the housing department was sort of like there are people there that are trying to get stuff going, and like are thinking long term, are trying to make the benefit systems work, and this sort of like political stuff is just this like it's this frustrating kind of like, oh, there's a new policy, you've got to change direction on something. It's like, I'm trying to get something going here, and that politics was just this disruptive, ignorant sort of force above everything else that wasn't really contributing anything useful. It was just like, okay, you know your constraints, you can start to be creative within those to actually serve the people. But then when the people keep changing the constraints in these stupid ways, you end up just not being able to get anywhere. And the people that lose are the people that rely on those benefits.
Well, it's one of the reasons I get so ratty about people bitching about their recycling collections. Like because, you know, 90% of households... 100% of households, but a huge number of voters in local politics have their bins collected, but thank God, a small fraction of them need social services of any kind. And so, when it comes to allocating budgets, obviously there's the statutory minimum you can get away with, and then there's like making people feel better about their recycling. And it's like being collected. It's like, just fuck off, make less rubbish and stop bitching about, because every complaint about a bin is a vote away from money being allocated to social care. Fact. I don't have a formula, but there's that as well. It's like, come on, people, if there is limited funds in your local authority, let them spend it on what it needs to be spent on, rather than what bugs you the most.
Shall we plough through? Do you want to take
Okay. Although the provision of social security to those in need is a public service and a vital anchor to prevent people being pulled into poverty, the policies put in place since 2010 are usually discussed under the rubric of austerity. But this framing leads the inquiry in the wrong direction. In the area of poverty-related policy, the evidence points to the conclusion that the driving force has not been economic, but rather a commitment to achieving radical social re-engineering.
So someone's trying to re-engineer society.
I used those exact words about universal credit. I was like, this is social engineering, and worse, it's Christian social re-engineering. Because the way they make people claim. Anyway, successive governments have brought revolutionary change in both the system for delivering minimum levels of fairness. Wow, it's these words. Successive governments have brought revolutionary change in both the system for delivering minimum levels of fairness and social justice to the British people, and especially in the values underpinning it. Key elements of the post-war Beveridge social contract are being overturned. In the process, some good outcomes have certainly been achieved, but great misery has also been inflicted unnecessarily, especially on the working poor, on single mothers struggling against mighty odds, on people with disabilities who are already marginalised, and on millions of children who are being locked into a cycle of poverty from which most will have great difficulty escaping. Most of the political debate around social well-being in the UK has focused only on the goals sought to be achieved. These goals are in many respects admirable, even though some have been controversial. They include a commitment to place employment at the heart of anti-poverty policy, a quest for greater efficiency and cost savings, a determination to simplify an excessively complicated and unwieldy benefit system. I could have written this report. A desire to increase the uptake of benefits by those entitled, removing the welfare cliff that deterred the beneficiaries from seeking work, and a desire to provide more skills training.
Okay, well, here's what's wrong with that. And maybe it's in the next paragraph. But as we have started hearing from the people talking about universal basic income, we need to think beyond basic employment as being the goal, a job at any cost. As long as it's a job, that's a success. That's something that we need to get past, because it's not.
Fundamentally, what's wrong about that, this idea that you have some employment and we top up the difference, is that that is a way of the government, my taxes, supplementing private industry. Who should not be allowed to make a profit that is subsidised by government because they're not paying people enough to live on.
Right, I hadn't even connected that at all. So now these people can get away with paying nothing because they know that
they can have a 0-hour contracts, because if next week I don't give you any work because I don't want to commit to giving you a proper job, then the government's going to pick up the slack.
Yeah.
No, fuck you. No. That's why, all these people, and I'm not a massive Corbyn fan by any stretch of the imagination. I think but this idea that we need these left socialist policies is for me, beyond debate. we can't lift we can't fix problems like climate change, we can't fix the problems in the world until everybody is off the poverty line.
Yeah.
That's it.
Like, Rutger Bregman says, like, when you're poor, your focus is narrowed, and like he talks about it in IQ points, your IQ drops. For whatever we think about the idea of an IQ.
Did I tell you when I went to that global entrepreneurial whatever it was and some guy was talking to me, and I said to him, actually poverty does have a measurable impact, and he was like, oh. I was like, yeah, now put that in your pipe and smoke it, you fucking venture capitalist. Anyway, sorry to
you get
interrupt
people you let people, like, just the solution to it is money, is not let's go. But universal credit and other far-reaching changes to the role of government in supporting people in distress are almost always sold as being part of an unavoidable programme of fiscal austerity needed to save the country from bankruptcy. In fact, however, the reforms have almost certainly cost the country far more than their proponents will admit. The many billions advertisers having been extracted from the benefits system since 2010 have been offset by the additional resources required to fund emergency services by families and the community, by local government, by doctors and hospital accident and emergency centres, and even by the ever-shrinking and underfunded police force. And that's, Rutger Bregman puts it again, the cost of poverty is high in healthcare, in policing, in all these other areas. You're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for people being poor.
Yep.
Leaving the economics of change to one side, it's the underlying values and the ethos shaping the design and implementation of specific measures that have generated the greatest problems. So the values are the problem. The government has made no secret of its determination to change the value system to focus more on individual responsibility, to place major limits on government support, and to pursue a single-minded and some claim simple-minded focus on getting people into employment at all costs. Many aspects of this programme are legitimate matters for political contestation, but it is the mentality that has informed many of the reforms that has brought the most misery and wrought the most harm to the fabric of British society. British compassion for those who are suffering has been replaced by a punitive, mean-spirited and often callous approach apparently designed to instill discipline where it's least useful, to impose a rigid order on the lives of those least capable of coping with today's world, and elevating the goal of enforcing blind compliance over a genuine concern to improve the well-being of those at the lowest levels of British society. I provide various examples later in this statement. I think, the next paragraph is Brexit. I think the listener, you can read that, but let's talk about the values. Let's talk about this individualised society before we, sort of like outro. It's your fault that automatic trucks have been invented.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying to people. It's your inadequacy. Yeah. This is a meritocracy. If you're not doing well, it's your fault.
It's your fault.
And this is the fundamental, that sort of conservative value that is...
Well, it's yes. There's this
wildfire.
And, it goes back to like that we were... I don't know if it was off or on podcast, we were talking about that David Lammy statement about, the mining and the industrial communities have been failed by education. It's not given them the skill. Like, it's just never ending. But if your family is poor, if your parents are struggling to work out how to feed you, then the chance of you going to school and walking away with a decent education are seriously impaired. Yeah. There's no and then your hope of getting out of that is just really low. It's by chance, it's by some miracle, really, and they don't even know. Like there's research cannot show how come some people make it and some people don't. Like, it's impossible to. It's so complex. It might be one conversation that you had one day with one person that just triggered your child brain to go, oh, that helped you. It's like it's the contempt, those poor people, they are wrong'uns.
They're just less than us. They're dirty. They're wrong. They're just poor. They just don't have as much money as you. That's the only difference. And you go back to that. Everyone getting the paid. I can't find a news story about that factory where everyone got paid the same. I've been looking for the reference, but it's kind of one of my, the meaning conference. They paid everyone the same, and it turned into a nice place for everyone. It's
Summa Cooperative. I know who they are just because I buy loads of their. Here you go. Summa, Summa.coop. COOP.
How's that spelled?
SUMA.
Summa.
COOP.
Right.
And they said there aren't many workplaces where there are no bosses, where everybody gets equal pay and an equal say. Working at Summa is pretty unique. Here at Summa we have two types of job, short term and members. But basically, and even if you read their meta description, because Summa is busy, it's hard work, but you'll be well rewarded with pay at the same rates as everyone else. Plenty of options for paid overtime.
So AOC, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, she's doing that, isn't she, with her staff? Yeah. It's going to pay everyone pretty much the same. Sort of similar tiers. Like, she's going to sacrifice the higher ones to pay the lower ones, like, a lot more.
Well, it's like I think it's emotion. That's hard for the top and the bottom. Sorry. It's.
Well, listen, is it hard for the top? Because they've got enough money to live, haven't they? So it's not like I'm going to have to. It's that thing of there's this asymmetry between plus 50 grand and minus 50 grand. Like, which
and I'm just saying that. Like, I think if you were on, I don't know, you're CTO or something, and you're expecting because you've earned, you've got all the bits of paper and you've worked hard and you've got, I think, psychologically to go from like 120 to 50. You're going to be like, it's going to take a deep breath and some strength of character to go, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but you get the pay cut and the story, right? You get to be part of something and if that's you, then you get the story, and it's a great story, right? And that's a great thing to be able to say, look, I am doing this. What are you doing? I did this. I think in real terms, you just look at it in terms of like an extra potato to someone with 20 potatoes doesn't mean much. An extra potato to someone with one potato is enormous. And that is why we tax the rich more, because it means less to them. It has less value for them in terms of their lives. So what's
fascinating about the Rutger Bregman guy as well is that, he talks about how the taxation system, this idea that the rich get taxed at the same level as everybody else is new. In 40s, 50s, America, there was a 90% tax rate.
Yeah, and it was great.
It was brilliant. Everyone was like wearing really cool clothes.
We're going to space, world trade fairs, House of the Future, all that stuff. Now it's like, I've got this startup where you can find out where your dog is at any time. That's probably quite a good one. I just can't think of a bad startup idea. It's yes. Yeah. What about this as a Patreon perk? We record reading out the whole document. And you can hear it if you support us on Patreon, just as like an audiobook type thing. But it's us. It's one of. I don't know if you like listening to me or Ivanka reading it out, but maybe that's a perk. We could do a version. For
we could have a competition.
$10 at 10. Well, $10. It's probably whoever's got time. It's probably whoever's got time to read it out. But or maybe like the $5 tier is me reading it out, and the $10 tier is Ivanka reading it out. Or vice versa. You tell me. But anyway, let us know if that's something because there's another 20 pages of this, and I kind of want to read it all now.
Yeah, I do now.
I want to know what the rest of it says. It's like
I want to read all the bit about digital by default.
And then
I scrolled down. I was like,
that'd be quite nice because then you can just like if you just want to hear it, you don't want to hear all the interruptions. Then that's quite a nice way to get that. So maybe we can do that as a thing if we do more of these documents. Let us know what you think because I've been looking at what our Patreon benefits would be, and I haven't been sure. This one, I think, like we get something out of it because we actually kind of read through the thing, get some practice reading through things. I think that's it for this week because we're out of time.
Yes.
So, yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for listening, everyone. We much appreciate it.
Yes.
If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com. Always, please do have a look in the notes because we do link everything. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can
find you, Michael.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com. You can
go and do some reviewing.
Doing some reviewing, some rating, telling your friends, get more people to listen. Yes, please.
And
buy a mug.
Yeah, buy a mug.
Buy a mug.
£75.
I might put one at £75. Have one for £8. I'd put it as. I hope that's okay. Let me know. But I think if you want to support the podcast, then it's a nice mug. It's a very nice mug. I'll put the link in the description, and I'll also try and get that somewhere prominent on the website as well. But I think it's nice, so you can do that. Merch! And thanks. Is that? And email us hello@grandpodcast.com. Find us Podcast Grand on Twitter. You can find us on the channels. We've got a YouTube thing. We've got all of it. But just grandpodcast.com.
We are everywhere.
We are everywhere, omnipresent. So thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.